Hello, my name is Donovan Dagner. I'm with Blue Ridge Equine Clinic. I have Alice Finnessy with me here today and Brie Perkins, and together we're going to try and give you a little primer on what it takes to get your mare bred and what kinds of things you should be thinking about when trying to decide if you want to breed your mare or not. Alice has a list of questions that she's put together from questions we commonly get from clients and types of things that they're looking to find out when they're first trying to figure out whether to breed their mare, so we're going to get to those. But first, I'm going to go over some of the basics. Initially, what are the qualities that we're looking for in mares? If you're thinking about breeding your mare, there should be some traits that she has that you're trying to pass on. Whether those are athletic, is she excellent at her job, or is there some personality characteristic about her that's just something that you really enjoy and you would like to have another horse in this world that has those same kind of traits. Those are kind of the biggest reasons why people are looking to breed their mare. There are other financial reasons that you might consider, but regardless of what your motivation is for breeding your mare, the things you need to look at are, her conformation, both athletically and for breeding purposes, her pelvic conformation or her perineal conformation. Make sure that she's built in such a way that it should be fairly easy for her to get bred and also for her to be able to deliver a foal. And those are things that your veterinarian can help you with. Some of the other things that you might think about are, how many foals, has she had any foals before, how many foals she has had, if she's had one or two foals and you know that history, how those pregnancies went is a pretty good idea of how this one will likely go. If she's had a bunch of foals before, there may be some difficulties. She may have some scar tissue or some wear and tear on her anatomy that makes it more difficult for her to either get pregnant or stay pregnant. If she hasn't had any foals, and she's a little bit older, it can be difficult for her to get pregnant. She may not cycle well, she may not produce great quality eggs, her hormones and her internal organs may not be in sync, and she may have some problems with her cervix opening. Those kinds of things are all things to be thinking about and talking about when you're looking to breed your mare. As far as general qualities about what is involved in a breeding cycle, typically, we're looking to breed mares that are between the age of 4 and 10 or 12. That's when they're most fertile. We've bred lots of mares outside of that age group, but it can be more challenging. Their heat cycle usually lasts about 4 to 7 days and repeats about every 21 days. There are some exceptions to that, but that's a general rule. And here in Virginia, we usually consider springtime to be the best time to breed mares. It just has to do with when they're most receptive, most fertile, and when it's the best time for the foal to be born, which is usually about 11 months, give or take, 340 days after we breed them. So that's kind of the basics. I think that's a good spot to leave it, and let's get into some of the questions that Alice has put together for us today.
Okay. First question, what are you checking for when you ultrasound the mare before you start the breeding process?
Good question. One of our biggest tools for checking these mares and figuring out what their status is the ultrasound. And with the ultrasound, we can look at their ovaries and their uterus. And what we're looking for is, do the ovaries have a normal size and shape? Do they have certain structures on them that give us an idea of where they are in their cycle? And we'll look at their uterus to see how thick it is, whether it has fluid in it, if there's edema that's meant to be there, or if there's thickening or fluid that's not supposed to be there. And those can give us clues as to how much wear and tear the uterus has on it, and also whether there's a likelihood of infection or not.
Sometimes you recommend to the mare owner that they have their mare cultured. What are you looking for when you do a culture on a mare?
Culture gives us another piece of information. After we look with the ultrasound and determine whether it's more or less likely that they would have some sort of infectious process going on, we can use a culture to actually swab the lining of the uterus and try and pick up any bacteria that might be in there and see if there is an infection. Usually recommend that in older mares or mares that have several foals before. Anything in their conformation that would suggest it's more likely that they might have an infection. Those are the kinds of mares that we would recommend a culture for.
Along those same lines, sometimes you recommend or request a biopsy be done. What is that looking for, and what do you see when you have a biopsy done?
A biopsy is yet another tool that we have. It involves taking a sample of the tissue on the lining of the inside of the uterus. Usually, again, recommend this in mares that have had multiple foals or older mares. And it gives us some idea of how much scar tissue may be present in the lining of the uterus, which has an impact on how well they can carry a foal to term and how well they are able to get pregnant.
If I don't have my mare's full medical history, is there a way to tell if she has had a foal before or how many foals she's had in her life?
By looking at the mare's udder and her perineal region, you can get an idea, perhaps, if they've had multiple foals before, but there's no surefire way to say, oh yeah, if she has this, she's had a foal before. It's all putting a couple pieces together and saying it's likely she's had a foal before or it's unlikely she's had a foal before.
You usually do the culture during one heat cycle, and then you would wait to breed the mare on the next heat cycle. When you do that, how long is the owner having to wait to breed the mare?
So generally, when we get our culture, it takes several days to get that back, and so we usually don't have enough time in that same cycle to breed that mare. So we do usually have to wait to the next cycle, which should be 14 to 21 days later, depending on where in the cycle we're starting. There are hormones and shots that we can give that will shorten that down to 7 to 14 days. It's just a matter of what time of year we're in and how fast we really need to move.
What is the difference between fresh and frozen semen, and would you recommend one over the other?
Fresh and frozen are both readily available out there, and different stallions promote their fresh semen more or their frozen semen more. The fresh semen is a little bit more limited in that it has to be collected within 24 or 48 hours from the moment we want to breed the mare. It won't last very long in the container, and it needs to be shipped overnight. Frozen semen is truly frozen, and it can last for years in the container, on the shelf, so to speak. And so that gives us a little more versatility on when we want to breed the mare and having to have the semen already there and not having to worry about it coming on time or not. In general, as far as fertility goes, frozen semen is not quite as successful as fresh semen in most stallions, so you lose some fertility in the freezing process.
If I can't tell if my mare is in season or having a heat cycle, is there a way you as a vet can tell that she's in season?
Yeah, first off, we kind of coach our clients on what to look for to see if their mares are in heat as far as their external appearance and their physical behavior. But if they're not showing good heat cycles or you're just not able to perceive that, we can look with the ultrasound and see where they are in their heat cycle. And there's also some blood tests that can be done that can help us try and predict where they are and when they will be coming into heat again.
When should a mare owner start the whole breeding process, like just the initial steps?
Well, you probably want to be thinking about it ahead of time as far as figuring out who your stallion is going to be and all that. So most people are thinking about this in the fall of the year before they want to get done. Most often we'll start somewhere around March, trying to see if the mare is cycling normally, make sure she doesn't have any uterine infections, and hopefully get them bred by April. In some cases, we're trying to get started early, and people will put their mares under lights in December, and then we can get started kind of middle of February. So it's all a matter of what kind of prep time you have ahead of time.
How soon can you tell if a mare is pregnant, and then how often do you check her at that point?
Typically, our first check is with the ultrasound about 14 days after they've ovulated, and at that point the embryo should be about 14 or 15 millimeters. So it's pretty easy to see. On that 14-day check, we also check for twins. Mares don't have a very good success rate of carrying twins, so we try to identify that early. Then following checkups, usually we check them again at about weekly intervals. So at 21 days, we look to make sure they haven't suffered a loss there. If they have, that's when they'll be coming back into heat again, so we can make sure we don't miss the next cycle. And then, assuming everything looks good at 21 days, we check them again around 28 days. At that point, we can see a heartbeat. Pregnancy is usually 28, 30 millimeters at that point, so it's really easy to identify, and you can start to see some structures in the fetus itself. So those are the first three kind of most important checks, and then there may be some subsequent checks thereafter depending on the mare's history or the confidence level of what's going on in there.
Can I ride my mare while you're trying to get her pregnant?
Generally, we try to limit the amount of stress on the mare, especially in that first period when we're trying to breed the mare and up until that 25 or 28-day pregnancy check, just to make sure everything settles and looks normal. After that, we usually say it's fine to ride and compete as long as it's not too stressful for the mare. If you got a really anxious mare, maybe it's not a great idea. And we usually figure it's okay to ride pretty strenuously up until about the third trimester, or when they start to show and look heavier. Then it's just not a good idea to push them hard at all, and maybe a little bit of hacking, but not much at that point.
Is there anything else I need to change, like my mare's feed, pasture, her routine, and while she's getting pregnant and during pregnancy?
As far as feed goes, not in the early stages. You want to be preparing for that last trimester, the last 60 days or so. You usually want to take them off of pasture here in Virginia because there's fescue almost everywhere, and fescue can cause some problems with milk production and with the placenta and lead to abortion or difficulties at the time of foaling. So we get them off of that fescue. Like I said, most pastures in Virginia have fescue, so you got to come up with a dry lot or some other alternative for that last 60 or 90 days or so.
Who do I talk to about selecting a stallion? Would I talk to my vet, or would you recommend someone else?
I think it's probably good to get some input from both, but primarily you want to talk to your peers or your trainer, whoever you are riding within your discipline, as far as which stallions have been producing foals that have then gone on to perform well, and which stallions maybe have some characteristics that will offset maybe some minor characteristics that you don't enjoy about your mare as far as conformation goes or something like that. So talking with people within your breed and within your discipline, and then once you kind of have it narrowed down, calling and speaking with the stallion owner or the stallion agent to see what that stallion's fertility is like, what their availability is, and sometimes they'll tell you, hey, this stallion makes bigger foals, and maybe if it's your mare's first time, she wants not such a big foal to begin with. All kinds of that information is available from the stallion side, and your veterinarian can help. If they've been working with your mare, can help you say, all right, make sure you look for things like this that might help offset these issues that your mare might have.
Does the mare owner arrange for the semen shipment, or is that something that the veterinary clinic or the vet handles?
Personally, I'm always willing to help out, but generally the best way to handle that is, the contract is between the mare owner and the stallion owner or agent. So it's best for them to talk directly, and I think we minimize the chance for miscommunications if we just keep as few people as possible in that loop. So unless there's some other extenuating circumstance, it's almost always the mare owner talking with the stallion owner or agent, and the veterinarian gives some input to the mare owner about when we want to breed the mare. They relay that to the stallion owner and make sure that they've got all their paperwork done. And that's usually the way it works.
All right. Those are all the questions I have for today.
Well, great. Those were some great questions. Hopefully they answered some of the questions you all have out there. If you have any other questions or you're interested in any other topics, please check us out at our website, blueridgeequine.com, or on Facebook. And stay tuned here to our YouTube channel. We're probably going to do some more of these, and there'll be other interesting topics. So hopefully this worked for you. And thanks again for tuning in.